Deshaun Watson introduced last Friday as the Browns quarterback. And I watched this news conference, and there were two, because there was one with Watson, the head coach Kevin Stefanski, and the general manager Andrew Berry. Both of the owners, Jimmy and Dee Haslam, were not there. Now, the big question I had was, you have a player who's making the most guaranteed money in NFL history, and the owners aren't there. What's going on here, given the allegations against Deshaun Watson? Now, to their credit, they held a separate Zoom news conference after the fact because they were in Europe for some sort of previous engagement. But I don't understand why they weren't there. Why not just postpone Friday's introductory news conference? And I know this happens all the time in sports, but to me, it was perfectly clear why the Steelers could not go after Watson, given Big Ben underwent similar, I'd say similar allegations, but allegations of his own previously in his career. And just from a PR standpoint, given that Watson will likely face a suspension, we don't know how long potentially, we don't know how long these civil accusations, these civil suits could be out there. There are 22 women out there still. But just from a PR standpoint, not having the owners there, not a good look for the Cleveland Browns.
See, Mark, I disagree with that. The owners usually get in the way when it comes down making these decisions and helping their franchise. Now, when you want to talk about doing exclusive work, I think the ownership for the Cleveland Browns really do trust the GM and the head coach. Now, I think they sat down. Just because they wasn't there don't mean they didn't sat down with Deshaun Watson. Because honestly, to get Deshaun Watson, you had to do so much homework. You had to be talking to his camp for at least a couple of months. You had to be surveying the land and understand the allegations and what the heck was going on for Deshaun Watson and your organization. So I really do disagree with the owners being there. I think the owners had – it's not that easy as an owner to change your schedule, especially when you're overseas. You know what I'm saying? But when it comes down to really putting their foot in and doing their homework, man, I think a lot of owners kind of get in the way. You know, and I'm going to say the Dallas Cowboys. So for that instance, I think the Cleveland Browns, I think they feel like they're on the cusp of getting into the playoffs and making a run with Deshaun Watson. Obviously, Deshaun Watson, out his allegations, he got one of them cleared up. Now it's just time to see what the silver suit will do with Deshaun. So I don't know how long the NFL will suspend Deshaun Watson. I think Deshaun will appeal it anyway. I don't think it's going to be as long as people think it is. He'll miss 3 or 4 games at max. I think, as far as like ownership, I think the owners, to some degree, they did exactly what they needed to do. They stayed out the way. You know, it's not their press conference. It's between the head coach and the general manager and Deshaun Watson. They just, between the head coach and the general manager, they had to get the green light and the A-OK from the ownership. And I don't think you just bring Deshaun Watson in without talking to any of the owners for an exclusive amount of time.
The issue I have is the Browns, their messaging has been mixed the entire time, Ike, in terms of they say that they do a comprehensive investigation.
Right.
Yet they haven't. And look, legally, their legal counsel said do not speak with any of the women. The NFL have done that. But how can you say that we've conducted a comprehensive investigation, which has spanned 5 months, without getting the perspective of the women, some of which have not given public testimony yet, with hopes that this does go to court? I don't anticipate that this will, and I think that eventually there will be settlements across the board. That's my prediction for what happened. I do think there will be a suspension. I'm of the thought process it'll be 8 games, and that it would then be Watson and his camp would try to appeal that down to lessen the amount of games he would miss. But the big crux that just to me wasn't answered forthright, and I can explain why it wasn't in just a second, was did he learn from what happened, or is he denying outright what happened? And we did not get a clear answer to that. They kind of skirted around that question. Now, the reason for that, Ike, is if this does go to court, and we've talked about this all the time, and this is where I put my reporter hat on, the burden of proof is much less in a civil case than it is in a criminal case. In a criminal case, which there are 2 Texas grand juries that have chosen not to press criminal charges against Watson. In a criminal case, the burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. In a civil case, it is just one scintilla over a majority, meaning the burden of proof is much, much less. So Watson still has to be careful what he says publicly, because that could be used against him if these civil suits do in fact go to trial. And so that's a lot of people are saying, well, why isn't Watson more forthright? Because, again, the potential, the possibility of him facing criminal charges, those are out the window. But he has to be careful what he says, because he could cost himself a lot of money. Now, what the Browns have done to protect Watson, and I don't fault the Browns for this at all. 5-year contract worth $230 million. The base salary on Watson's first year is $1 million, meaning if he faces a suspension from the NFL against the NFL's conduct policy, it is taken out of that $1 million base salary for this upcoming 2022 season, out of the $230 million guaranteed, the $230 million on his deal, and the most guaranteed money by a single contract, $230 million guaranteed. And that's the most guaranteed money by $80 million in the history of the NFL.
Yeah, that's fully guaranteed. You got to make sure you put the fully guaranteed on there. So yeah, if they do come up and he gets suspended, that's $1 million. So now I'm looking at 229. I think that's a sweet deal for Deshaun Watson. Like I say, man, I don't think the Cleveland Browns will pick up Deshaun Watson and not do enough exclusive and extensive homework on these. I think the Cleveland Browns have been looking at this since last year. And there's a few teams that has been looking at this since last year on getting Deshaun Watson. I think the Cleveland Browns just pulled the trigger. That's all it was. So we shall see. Like you said, the criminal part is thrown out the window. The two suits, they looked at Deshaun Watson and was like, man, this isn't enough evidence. Now the civil suit, man, it's either hush money or, man, we got to settle out in court. Basically, that's just what it is. And it's he said, she said. So Deshaun Watson, since day one, he said he liked his chances. He said, man, I don't mind sitting out because I really do like my chances over these civil suits and what these allegations and what these women are saying about me. So to stand that firm and to be able to sit and to have enough evidence, I'm guessing he has enough evidence. The Cleveland Browns was like, man, you know what? Let's sit down with Deshaun Watson and his team. Let's look at the paperwork. We can't talk about the paperwork publicly, but let's look at some of this paperwork and let's take our chance. Let's look at the AFC North and let's take another chance. So it's and I've been part of these kind of suits in my years when it came down to teammates as well. It just wasn't publicized and social media wasn't that big back in the day. But, man, you got to understand, man, I think Deshaun Watson has a clear chance of winning these cases.
I will say this. He will be in uniform in the 2022 season, and a player of his talent, football, off the field aside, football alone, we have been robbed of that as football fans. But I'll just put it this way, Ike. I am glad he is Cleveland's problem. And I am because a lot of people reached out to us on our YouTube page saying, what do you think about Watson potentially to the Steelers? And just given that the Steelers had to undergo a lot of, again, I say similar, but what happened with Ben Roethlisberger all of those years ago, again, from a PR standpoint, just good luck to them. And we'll see how all of this unfolds.